Brian Flores is suing the Dolphins, the Giants, and the Broncos for alleged racial discrimination in hiring.
Yes.
Right? And I'll just start with this. Listen, the Rooney Rule, for me, is one of the stupidest rules in existence as far as it goes for sports leagues. Now, I understand the spirit of the rule, okay? I understand what it was meant to do.
Equal opportunity employment.
Yes. But it's a flawed rule for the very fact that, and like my point, and I'll just say this, is with the Giants, obviously they had a black GM, won 2 Super Bowls with him, multiple black coaches on their staff, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators. Because the guy doesn't get the job, and I think he said he had a text from Bill Belichick telling him before his interview, before Dable was hired, that Dable was the guy. Belichick somehow mistakenly sent it to him, whatever that's all about.
Maybe because Brian.
But the truth of the matter is, if the Giants, they got a GM that came from Buffalo, he probably had his heart set on the hiring Dable. But the rule forces them to interview Flores. Right. So, yeah, he may claim that it's a formality, but it is if they already decided on Gable and they have to interview a black candidate.
Right. If it is a requirement, then yes. I mean, that's what you're going to get into, and that is the gray area of that rule. But, I understand if Flores is upset at the situation, right? Because I don't think he should have left Miami by any stretch of the imagination. But to come out and now badmouth these teams regarding this, I mean, the coveted position in football, right, as a quarterback, you go after quarterbacks. You're claiming racism. You're going after 2 teams that have black quarterbacks that they've stuck by and they've stuck with and said that we can win with these guys. We've seen the hiring of black coaches and black GMs, and we might be speaking out of turn here a little bit, not understanding the full backstory to everything. But I know the Bears just hired Brian Poles from Kansas City. Like there's hirings about, and this rule only lends a hand to possibly pointing out prejudices if minorities aren't hired.
Yeah,
right?
well, there is a lack of black coaches in the NFL. That's a fact.
Yes.
Head coaches.
Yeah.
I think there's only one.
Happened with Eric Bieniemy a few seasons ago too with the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Well, what happens every year, but the problem what hurts Bieniemy is that Andy Reid is the offensive genius.
Yeah.
So it's hard for, I think, teams to differentiate what's Andy and what's Eric, right? But my point is with Flores, I think he probably has a case with Dolphins. He was there. But to point fingers at 2 other franchises when all you could claim is that it was a formality, well, the spirit of the rule is not that, but the actual action of the rule being played out winds up being that so any coach they would hire besides him, you could then go and say that it's a formality.
Yeah.
If I wanted to hire Dable and I had already had my mindset, he was there with him in Buffalo. So it's very possible, and I think that is the case, that he knew he wanted to hire him. Dable was a hot name for most of the season, and that's who he wanted. But the rule forces you to have that interview, and then that's just kind of how it is. If anything, he should be petitioning the NFL to change the Rooney Rule.
My thing with it is, so I think the Rooney Rule is, I think it's good for the reason that it gives opportunity that might not, just because of existing prejudice or, structural things with organizations and who they want, who they don't want, things like that. But I think where Flores is coming from, and this is such an early thing that we haven't had all the details for anything like that, so we couldn't be speaking out of turn. But I think how it's undergone, like maybe Flores felt like his interview was an afterthought, and that could be because they already knew who their guy was. But it's more the conditioning of the interview. It's how Flores maybe felt before, after, or during, those types of things where the prejudice could be because in his perspective, he wasn't going to get hired. He's going into an interview. And then with these other teams, he might have felt a little slighted or disrespected because he's just showing up because he has to be there, which is the rule.
Yeah.
But it's like almost put on face, like get it done correctly. I think that's the problem for him.
But yeah, I understand that. And what I would say and push back is that that's the flaw of the rule itself.
Yeah, right.
Like the spirit to want to have diversity is good. Forcing people to do it creates an issue that doesn't have to really be like.
Right.
I understand this rule being constituted when
creates
it was
prejudice
when it was there, right? Because we're talking about maybe 30, 40 years ago when it was much more of an issue. But now when you have as many black quarterbacks as you do and black people in the front office for a lot of these teams, I think that the Rooney Rule has kind of outlived its use. And what I would say about the way he feels, I mean, there was also 5 other coaches that were interviewed for the job that didn't get it.
Yeah,
and they just happened to not be black. So,
and to pick, I mean, the teams that he picked too. I mean, shit, the Giants. Let's be honest. Like, you could probably go and interview for a head coach. Like, they're going to entertain anybody and everybody, right? Before they finally
I
pick.
like what you're doing here, but
you like that. So they're going to entertain anybody that they have, right? I mean, and on the flip side of that, like he's now underhandedly like totally discredited Brian Dable as well. Like, hey, you're only getting this because you're.
I didn't think about that.
And they work together too.
And Dable, I mean, the guy's a mastermind. I mean, the Bills have been a really solid team for the last couple of years, and they're going to be very solid going forward. You know, and I don't like what it says to Dable. It's kind of stealing his. You know, Dable should be happy about this hiring. He's probably celebrating. Then that shit comes out, and he's like, oh, "Man, this is how I have to start my career here."
They won't be there forever though, because they're gonna go into all these cases, obviously, and they're going to figure out the details and things like that. But
I do think Dolphins have an issue, though.
The Dolphins do have an issue because there was a report that came out, and I pulled it up, that basically the owner, Stephen Ross, was upset with Flores for being too successful and was offered to pay him money.
To lose games, yeah.
So I feel like for Brian, I'm trying to fight for Flores in a way because this is all of how he's been treated, right?
Yeah, he should have never been fired
through the Dolphins with all that, but also like his interviews, and because to him it doesn't feel like he's been given a shot. Like if that's true or if it's not, if it's based off his pedigree, if it's based off anything else that it shouldn't be based off of, it's just that's why he probably filed this lawsuit, is because he feels like he's been disrespected and mistreated for his own reasons. So.
I think that's fair, and I'll end my statement with this. I think, like I said, I think he does have a case with the Dolphins. I think he should have just left it there, because I feel like the Broncos and the Giants are kind of catching shrapnel because they didn't hire him.
Yeah.
So I feel like in this case, the only way that they don't get sued is if they hire him. So if the Giants hired him, would he have sued the Broncos? Or would he have just been happy and not sued anybody?
I kind of feel like Denver's just like WTF over this whole thing. Like, how did we get involved?
Look, I think they hired him, but I mean, they interviewed him. What I'll say is there's probably some real issues there. That's where he has experience. He went into an interview. That interview might have been painted by his emotions or whatever. But like I said, both of those teams interviewed other coaches, and I mean, did the Broncos hire anybody yet?
Yeah, I think they did. But I did see the one thing. I know that Flores said that when he met with Denver, the administration that he met with was late and disheveled. I don't know if you read that.
Yeah, that's not good. But this is my problem with the rule, is that
quote unquote sham interview.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If I'm let's say, all right, let's.
I just don't like what this does, because I think he's too good of a coach to like.
Well, he's hurting his future prospects,
and he said that himself.
Let's say I'm Puerto Rican, right? So let's say there was a rule you had to interview a Puerto Rican guy.
Yeah.
All right, so that means I'm gonna go into every interview. I had to question now if this is a formality or if they're really interested.
Yeah.
That's what the rule does. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about what?
Do you like that? Do you like that you go into the interview and feel that way?
Well, there's no rule there, so I don't know what the fuck you're asking.
As a Puerto Rican fella going into a hire where they have to interview a Puerto Rican fella, how do you feel about that? Are you on the hot seat? Do you feel like you're only getting the interview because you're Puerto Rican, or do you think that that you have a fair shot at it? Or is it in the back of your head?
The hell are you talking about?
I don't know.
I think it's a fair shot.
But what I'm saying is that the very nature of the rule being there creates the conflict within the person that's at the interview. Like, it's like if I have a bunch of money and a girl wants to hang out with me, because I have the money, is she here because of the money or because of me? That's what the rule is. Are they interviewing
Probably the
me?
money
'Cause-
for film.
yeah, probably. But the formality, but I don't have money, so it's been me most of the time.
Nice.
So the formality is inherently in the back of his head because of the rule. So
Could
it
be.
paints everything. I'm saying maybe they are prejudiced, but what I'm saying, even if they're not, it still could be painted like if they just weren't interested in him as a coach, like maybe they weren't interested in 3 of the other guys. Now because of the rule, now I have something to point to. Like, well, it was because of this.
It could have just been, and
It could have just been they didn't want to go to defensive coach
it could have been
because they wanted to.
I'll wait
their
for the
quarterback.
documentary, Brian Flores after the final rose. I think that's what he's really upset about is that he didn't get that. He didn't get that rose and get to go to the fantasy suite with either Denver or the Giants.
Let's just hope that it's
trying to bring in the
treatment by the teams, and that it just is it's more justice being served than anything. So hopefully.